Welcome back to Dr. SuperCoach YouTube for Pigs Round 18 Captaincy Recommendations. It was an interesting week last week. There's a lot of those popular captain options scoring in that really awkward 120 to 130 range. I'm thinking like Cherry, Bont, Dacos, all those guys kind of doing that. A few of the other ones failed. Then there were a few guys that kind of popped out of the box and did some big ones that we maybe a little bit unexpected, but you can't predict them all. So last week, I was on the Cherry VC. He was on 108 halfway through the third quarter, and that looked like a guaranteed 150 the way he was going. Then 2 head knocks, and going off for a HIA meant he just scraped to a 126. He was probably actually fortunate to get that. The scaling just really worked well for him. So I had my loop set up to take that on the Friday night. But once I hit the pub with the Dr. Supercoach Patreons for our catch up on Saturday, I thought, let's have some fun here. Let's roll the dice on Max Holmes, captain. Let's all watch him together, cheer him on. Turns out it wasn't that fun watching him. 36 disposals, 7 marks, and a goal. That should have led to a monster score with those stats. But 6 clangers and 58% disposal efficiency, that tanked his Supercoach output. So Holmes just scraped to 100, cost me 26 points. Whatever, it's not really here nor there. But it was worth it for the banter on the day. Now moving into round 18, let's get stuck in. Oh, speak of the devil, Max Holmes, number 3 vice captain. As I said, Max had a great game statistically last weekend, if you remove the fact that he constantly gave the ball back to Richmond. Some would consider this week to be a slightly tougher assignment, heading to Sydney to play GWS, but it's actually not as daunting a task as it previously was. The Giants are actually the 3rd easiest matchup for inside midfielders over the last 10 games. That's crazy given how restrictive they were last year. We've recently seen a Took 131, an Anderson 139, a Humphrey 131, Butters 143, Bergman 128, Prestia 132, Chera 122, Bolton 150, Baz 154, and Holmes himself with a 134. Whew, that's a lot of names. The Giants are leaky, man. Now, you definitely could consider Bailey Smith as your VC here in this same matchup if he plays, especially given that Bailey had a 154 against the Giants earlier in the year. I'm just a little bit more comfortable with Holmes at the moment. Like, he's the one playing every game and the one in really good form. I'm sure he would have studied the tape of last week and worked out why he turned it over so much. He should be back, hopefully, to his normal accurate disposal efficiency, and when he does that, it's always a good VC option. Number 2, vice captain, could be Nick Martin. Nick has been down lately. He hasn't cracked a ton for 3 weeks. But luckily for him, he gets a matchup with Richmond this weekend. This is a team he just scored 163 against during Dreamtime at the G earlier in the year. That score is his season high and his career high. So the Tigers are the 3rd easiest opponent for wingers and attacking defenders, and the easiest matchup in the league for designated kickers. Martin's role this year has encompassed all of those play styles, as he has free roam to reign the entire ground and get back and help his defenders or get forward and hit the scoreboard. That game against Richmond earlier in the year, he roamed free and he racked up 35 disposals, 9 marks, 8 tackles and 2 goals. That's an insane stat line. And to be honest, I can't see Richmond paying him any attention in this one either. It's not like Richmond are really out there to win. There's no reason to think that Nick Martin can't have another spike game this weekend. He does play a bit later on the Saturday night, but I've got him in this section. I think he's one of those kind of high upside VC guys rather than your typical safe fullback captain option. But he's not my number 1 because we've got Nick Dacos. To me, this is the easiest VC of the week by far. An in-form Nick Dacos with a 3-round average of 138 coming up against the 2nd easiest matchup for inside midfielders on a Friday night. I mean, easy money. The only slight flag here is that it's a night game in Gold Coast, that can be sometimes slippery, but I wouldn't let that turn you off this opportunity. Dacos has scores of 157, 131 and 127 in his last 3 games. But the real cream on top of this recommendation is what inside midfielders have been doing against the Suns lately. So let's go. Merritt, 159. Cozzy Pickett, 121. Green, 136. Holmes, 152. Atkins, 145. Brayshaw, 123. Steele, 131. Newcomb, 121. Libba, 132. And Richards, 127. Whoa, that's a lot of scores. This Gold Coast team have been backing themselves in to win the midfield battle, and that means they haven't really been employing a tagger at all this year. And they've been, since the jump, since round 1 and 2, they've been some of the easiest teams to score against. And look, the Nick Dacos equation is simple. When he's allowed to run free without a tag, you want to have him in your captaincy plans. Don't overthink this one, just do it. Pod captain, a little bit of a different one here. Not often I'd go for a teenager as my pod captain, but here we are. So last week, Lockie Ash gave us another classic Lockie Ash score, another score between 105 and 120. That's just what Lockie Ash seems to be doing. But I've got a good feeling about this week's pod recommendation. Colby's been racking up the pills since moving into defence recently, and he's got scores of 144, 108 and 123 in that time. He does also have 2 sub-tons, but those show his ceiling. And as a non-owner, I actually think I've been let off the hook a few times with some of his inaccurate kicking. He could have gone bigger, and I genuinely think there's a Colby McKercher 150 in the works before the season is done. Is it this week? I'm not sure, but the matchup is brilliant for him, so it actually could be. The Demons are the easiest opponent for attacking defenders, and the 3rd easiest opponent for designated kickers. I mean, in previous weeks on this video, I've told you how the Demons are just giving up a huge amount of marks and a huge amount of kicks to their opponents, and that's obviously translating to big defender scores against them. Like we've seen a Noble 132, a Rosie 115, a Howe 155, and a Wilkie 150. Yeah, you get the picture. This is a great matchup for Colby, and as the main distributor coming out of the Roos backline, he should have as much ball as he can handle. And like I said, he's been letting us non-owners off the hook a little bit with some inaccurate kicking and some turnovers. If he hits his targets one of these weeks, there's a 150 coming. If he hits his targets this week, it could be happening this week. Nank the Tank. Nank was another player whose stat line looked great on the surface last week. You look at it, you're like, 18 disposals, 4 tackles, 37 hitouts and a goal. Wow, that's a good game. But 5 clangers and 50% disposal efficiency, that tanked his score to a sub-ton. What was going on in Geelong over the weekend? There were plenty of great scores gone begging through poor kicking efficiency. The good news for Nank owners is that he gets a chance to redeem himself instantly this weekend against Essendon. This is likely to be a Nank versus Goldstein battle, and Goldstein has been the 4th easiest ruck matchup over the last 10 games, so he's not restricting anyone. I mean, he allowed Moyle to have a 99 on the weekend, and prior to that there was a Tom de Koning 146, an English 122, a Grundy 121, and a Cherry 146. So easy points to be had against Goldstein. Nank's got scores of 127 and 135 in his last 3 meetings with the Bombers, including that 127 was in their meeting last year. So there is history. Nank didn't play at Dreamtime in the G this year. He had a rest, so hard to know. Well, we don't have any really recent data, but last year's data says this should be a pretty safe captain. Number 5, Errol Goulden. Errol's warming up, folks. He had a 95 in his first game back, but that was in only 88 minutes of game time. The Swans won easily that week against Port, and they kind of managed him back in. Despite that, he still went at 1.1 points per minute, which is a very, very good clip. Anytime someone goes over 1 point a minute, that's really good. Since then, he's returned to his 112 minutes per game that we're used to seeing from this fitness machine. And in those games, he went at a 1.3 and 1.1 points per game again. They're huge numbers to sustain. So that resulted in scores of 146 and 122 in full games this season. So yeah, he's averaging 134 when he plays a full game this year. I mean, of course, your sample size is only 2 games, but those were against Bulldogs and Freo, who are actually fairly restrictive opponents to wingmen. So Errol has done well to pop those scores against them. And the exciting thing this week is a matchup with St Kilda, who are a very positive matchup for wingmen and for designated kickers. I mean, we saw Pat Lipinski smash them for 138, and Sam Closey did a 110. And let's be honest, those wingmen are not at Gordon's level. Now, there is always the risk of a Windhager tag. He has been moved out of the CBOs over the last 2 weeks. Looked at his heat map. He's actually been playing a lot more of kind of half-back role a bit. So I wouldn't let that get in the way of the Gordon captaincy if you're considering it, because he hasn't, Windhager hasn't really been tagging or hasn't really been playing that wing role or CBA role. It's been more half-back. So it could happen. He could go to him, but I mean, it may not. Then in the same game, hey, how about Nasiah? How good is Wang Diddley going? Scores of 119, 142, 117 and 155 in his last month. He's suddenly showing that elite ceiling that hadn't been there before. It's come at a huge cost to Jack Sinclair, but a brilliant result for Wang owners. His new career high 155 last week against Hawthorn came as a surprise, as the Hawks are genuinely quite restrictive for defenders and designated kickers. Well, this week, the matchup is certainly not restrictive. A date with the Swans, who are the 4th easiest matchup for designated kickers and the 2nd easiest matchup for attacking defenders. I mean, this is a Sydney team that, just recently gave up a 126 to Joel Jeffrey, 157 to Luke Ryan, 119 to Jordan Clark, 122 to Ollie Hollins, 111 to Jasper Fletcher, and a 144 to Bailey Dale. Plus, this is at Marvel Stadium. This is a venue we often see some big scores to guys that are high volume kickers. It's usually a pretty good ground for hitting your targets and not turning it over just because the roof's often closed. There isn't the wind. It's kind of a nice controlled atmosphere. Wang is not normally someone we think of as a safe fallback captain option, and I've often recommended Sinclair over him this year, but I think it's time to reassess that. He hasn't gone under 100 in 6 weeks, and in that time he hasn't gone under 25 kicks in a game. That gives him an incredible floor that not many others in the league have, and I think you could use this as your safe fallback captain, especially given this Sydney matchup that are giving up lots of points to defenders. Number 3 captain option is Zach Butters. Zach's one of the informed midfielders of the comp. He's got a 5-round average of 122, despite getting tagged in 3 of those games. Well, there isn't likely to be a tag this week against West Coast. I mean, Brady Hoff could try, like he tried against Dacos, who's still scored 131, so I'm not really worried. We know Zach Butters has a 160 plus ceiling. He's already demonstrated that twice this year. I think non-owners have gotten a bit lucky with the tags over the last month, and he could punish them this week. I mean, some recent scores against the Eagles include Finn Callahan's 144, Josh Kelly 129, there was that Dacos 131 that I mentioned, but in the same game, Pendlebury did 129, and then just before that, there was a George Hewitt 127 and a Sheasel 137. And that's actually just in their last 4 games. So there's some big scores. And someone of Zach Butters' talent should add another notch to his belt against West Coast. And here we go, playing in the last game of the round. This is easily one of the best fallback captain options of the week. This one's just safe as houses, but it has the potential for a spike score in there as well. Now, Zachary Merritt. A shout out here to Drew Jones, aka Goat Fantasy. If you aren't yet listening to Drew's podcast, you are handicapping yourself. Last week, Drew predicted that Zach Merritt would return to the midfield with Darcy Parish's injury. He also argued that Essendon will have sat down and had a reset at their bye, probably realised Zach needs to go back into the engine room, and boy did he ever. Merritt saw a 19% bump in CBAs against Gold Coast compared to what he's been doing this season, and that returned into his previous career mark of 81%. Zach's normally been an 80% CBA guy, and he went back to that last week. That led to him being around the ball much more, and he rewarded his owners with the second highest score of the round, a monster 159. Well, Drew Jones was on the money there, and now with Jai Caldwell's ankle injury, there's even more reason for Merritt to stay in the midfield for Essendon. Look, he might become a tag target in future weeks as the premium mid, but it won't happen this week. A matchup with Richmond, who haven't been tagging anyone. A matchup with Richmond, who he scored 156 against earlier in the year. A matchup with Richmond, who he has scores of 162 against just a couple of years ago. This is a matchup with Richmond, who are the easiest matchup for inside, one of the easiest matchups for inside midfielders. So, yeah, I mean, all the signs here are pointing to another Zach Merritt monster score this week. Number 1, look out, Brodie Grundy. Brodie Grundy is him, the guy that got away from most of us, but one that maybe some of the astute coaches identified and got on. If that's you, he is just going to keep rewarding you. He's got the best run for ruckman for the remainder of the year, and this week is no exception. A date with Rowan Marshall, who's the third easiest matchup for opposing ruckman over his last 10 games. I mean, he just allowed a Meek 140 and a Cameron 156, and he allowed both Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson to ton up in the same game. Darcy had a 117, Jackson had a 116. I can't remember seeing many occasions when a dual ruck setup have both tonned in the same game, but that's just how leaky Marshall is at the moment. We know he's playing injured, we know he's pushing through the pain, but we also know his opponents are taking advantage. Well, this week he matches up with the hottest player in the competition. Brodie Grundy has a 5-round average of 156. 156! No one else is coming within 30 points of him over that period. That is insane. So this is the best player in the competition right now against a wounded opponent. I mean, I feel bad as a non-owner. Just chalk this one up to another monster score. There we go. Those are my top favourite 10 options this week. Look, as always, I'm going to give you some names that I think you could use in Draft League. I think they'll still do well. John Noble, I've actually been recommending him a lot in this draft section, and he's been really good. I actually nearly had him in the big dog section in my top 10, but I just thought I just bumped him out for Errol. So John's probably actually stiff not to miss the mark. Then we've got some of the other Collingwood boys. I've talked about Dacos, but one of Sidebottom or Pendlebury or Crisp always pops up at the same time. Not always at the same game, but one of them always seems to have a good one. Who knows who it'll be? Maybe it's Steele. I think one of them will do well. I talked about Max Holmes. I said at the same time you could also do Bailey Smith as your VC. I think that's a fair option. The Demons midfielders against North Melbourne should do well. I'm talking like Petrarca and Oliver and Viney. Caleb Daniel as well. I've talked about McKercher. So Daniel could benefit. Sinclair could benefit, like I talked about Naz, but Sinclair's been really out of form, so you would have to see something that I haven't. A few more of the Port boys against West Coast. I think both Rosie and Horn Francis should do well. Then actually a little cheeky Tom McCarthy. Port are giving up a lot of points to defenders, so maybe Tom could. I don't know if you're ready to captain him yet, but maybe in draft you could have a little look. Anyway, I'm planning to vice captain Nick Dacos on the Friday night. I think that is so easy. And then I'm planning to use Butters as my fullback captain on the Sunday if I need it. And I think he's going to be really safe as well against West Coast. Thanks for watching. Good luck this weekend.